be out of the building by 8 o'clock. They close, the employees will want to go home, so we should get out of their way.
Right.
Now, I could talk about what's going on for 2 hours. I don't want to stay here that long. So,
some of the best and most interesting stuff is when we have time for questions at the end. So
yeah,
you
absolutely.
You go a half hour, give us a half hour.
Yeah.
Questions, something
Well,
like
in fact, I'll tell you what, if you don't mind, let's do this. Why don't we start off, tell me what you want to hear about it, and then I'll weave it into my remarks. How does that sound? That way I'll make sure I'm covering things you actually care about. And because my intention would tell you about, just about where we sit right now, obviously, in Wisconsin, and to make sure that you all understand with this budget that just passed, what the implications are for the average working family, what the implications are for the future of our children in this state, what the implications are for us in terms of how we compete, around the globe. And so that's what my intention would be to talk about, obviously. And I think it's very important that there's just a few statistics that you need to know about, because I want you to be able to convey this so that your neighbors, your friends, other people fully understand just how extreme and how counterproductive what is going on right now in terms of just the last budget that we passed. You probably know about a lot of things beyond that. But aside from that, so I can weave into those remarks other things as well. So tell me what else you want to hear about, and I'll try to weave those in if that sounds good to people.
I'd like to hear how that future can be changed.
Good. I'll talk about that too.
I'd like to know what your thoughts are and what we can do about the taconite line.
Okay, great. Actually, I just received some news that apparently it might be just, and I didn't hear it direct, I heard it secondhand, but that they now are removing these security members because they weren't licensed in Wisconsin to begin with. So that's good news. I'm sure any of you that saw the pictures that were on Facebook. And this essentially is sort of like the successor organization to Blackhawk, which of course had all kinds of problems overseas, and certainly is not appropriate. Even if you want to have security guards guarding any private property, that isn't who any of us would ever want to see guarding property in Wisconsin. Other things too?
That was announced on NPR.
Okay, good. Yeah, I trust it based on the So that's good. What else do you want me to talk about?
The Wisconsin State Journal reports that they'll be back in a couple days.
Yeah.
The security guards, this is only
Okay.
temporary.
All right. So I'll make sure I touch on it because I'm sure that's true. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very important point. Thanks for bringing that up. Yep.
Act 10, and then over some bill that was just...
Yeah. So great news in terms of 2 court seasons. So I'll leave that in as well.
Your response to the budget then?
Yep. Definitely talk about that.
I know state healthcare has been getting hacked, some of our governors been in the seat, and I'd like to know how much more it's getting hacked up.
How much more? What in
How much more it's
healthcare?
getting hacked up, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's a very important data point that I think it's so important to understand this because the implications are very significant. Other.
I'm concerned about privatization.
Good. Yep.
This is great stuff here, but this is a very small group. Why isn't there a Democratic media list telling people all over the state how their quality of life is being diminished?
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, we should really spend a little bit of time on that because we've done a number of media blitzes all across the state. It's really a reflection of how the media covers things these days. So we should talk about that, frankly. Okay?
Everyone seems to be aware of the increased debt that students have piled up in their
Yes.
school. No one seems to be making the point. The reason that debt is piling up is because the states have been underfunding the universities countrywide
Right.
for years and years and
That's
years.
true. I know a recent phenomenon. And there's something that happened in the budget too that I'm going to tie together with that. Let me get started then, and then we'll. I think those. I kind of get a sense of where you're going with this, unless somebody has something burning you want to make sure.
No.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
Shouldn't all potential candidates for governor on the Democratic side be going from fair to fair this summer?
I don't know about fear to fear, but obviously I think we got to start really ramping it up, and I think you're going to see that very soon. So, well, let me get started, just because, and I won't take a long time, because I just want to make sure that you're sort of clued in, because I think this budget is just emblematic of what's going on in our state. And it's something that is so against, the heritage that this state stands for, It is so against the values that any of us that grew up in Wisconsin could have ever imagined. And in virtually every single major policy area. And it's just, really, it's absolutely startling. In fact, of course, the poll number suggests that, whoever might take on Walker's going to have a rough ride, and, it's virtually a cinch. And, and it's so hard to imagine how that could possibly be the case. I mean, when you look at his record, his actual record of non-accomplishments, and then you look at how much he's diminished, all of the key things that this state has ever stood for. I mean, I grew up in this state. I traveled the globe before I came back from the legislature. And, as I traveled the globe, I was always so proud to say that I'm from Wisconsin. Because to me, it meant something. Wisconsin was a state that always believed in quality education. Wisconsin was a state that, had a sense of basic fairness. Wisconsin was a state that looked out for people's rights and their opportunities and wanted to make sure that we would progress as a state. I mean, our models forward. And I was always so proud to be from this state. And on every major issue, we have gone in virtually the opposite direction of what our heritage would suggest we would stand for as a state. So how can it be that, our governor can still have the level of popularity it is? And I have a sense of that. And I'm going to talk about that, but I'm going to try and leave that in my remarks. Because I kind of have a sense of what might make people think that somehow, they might like some of the things that he's doing. And I think it's a mistaken understanding of what he's actually done. And I think that's part of the problem. And I think that as much as we've tried, and I like I brought it up about, the media blitz, why are we not getting this stuff out? And of course, the good news is for those people that are active on social media, I mean, it's all there. I mean, frankly, my colleagues and, myself, we try hard, we post things regularly, and, we're constantly putting, out there the few articles that happen to really cover these things and try and help to interpret them. And it's in living color. I mean, it's really quite glaring, what's going on in the state right now. And, so take this budget, for instance. Let's talk about just a few statistics. Now, why would the governor, what would he take out of this budget that people would like? Well, he cut taxes. So people think, isn't that great? People are hurting right now, and he's going to help them out. And and I understand that. I mean, our president ran on, holding down taxes for the middle class. And at a time when the economy is struggling, you can understand where that would be very appealing and that people do need to have some relief. But the governor's tax proposal, and make sure you get the statistic, it's well over 10 times the tax benefits for people making over 300 grand than for the average working family. I mean, so the average working family will get less than $10 a month. So think about that. Well, what is a person going to do with $10 a month? But the person making over $300,000, they're going to get a tax break somewhere in the neighborhood of about $140 a month. You can actually make a car payment on a small car. Now, where is the basic fairness? That's not the state that we grew up in, but equally as significant. What did they do? They collapsed the rates. On the federal level, there's all the talk about the Warren Buffett rule, about how Warren Buffett shouldn't pay, a smaller percentage of taxes than his secretary. So what does Governor Walker and the Republicans do? They collapse the rates. So in a state like Wisconsin that believes in a progressive income tax, so that if you make a little bit more, that marginally, and you understand how marginal rates work, so everybody pays, up to $30,000 at a certain rate, even if you make $2 million. But then everybody pays at the same rate, going up to 60, and then 90, and then above that. So what the governor did, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but what they did in this budget, if you make roughly, let's just see, and I don't have the statistics to the penny, but roughly like $22,000 now, you're going to pay the same tax rate as somebody making $220,000. So, the person that makes the latte for the corporate executive is going to pay the same tax rate, as that person that's at $220,000. On what basis would we as a state ever have thought this was basic fairness? And so that's why you get to that point that, people will make, well over 10 times, in fact, it's about 12 times the tax benefit if you make over $300,000 a year. Now, almost any economist will tell you that if you want to stimulate the economy, you help people in the middle class or those struggling to get in the middle class. But worse than that, the part you have to understand is people that work for $7 or $8 an hour their taxes went up in the last biennium. They actually went up because, the Fiscal Bureau, when they store these things, they changed the earned income tax credit. So their taxes went up. But this session, they didn't even correct that. They didn't reduce their taxes. They didn't take away that tax increase, and they didn't give them a tax break. So anybody that works for $8 an hour, you have to tell them, this governor raised your taxes 2 years ago, and he gave everybody else in the state a tax decrease, small as it might be for the average working family, but for you, who work for $8 an hour, all you have is a tax increase. No, this is not a value that this state believes in. This state doesn't believe in that, but any economist will tell you that that's the absolute worst thing you could do. Because people that work for $8 an hour, they get up every morning, work 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, maybe have a child or two, that struggle to put food on the table. You give them a tax break, and they're going to spend every nickel of it. Because right now they've got plastic on their roof to keep it from leaking. They've got a car that they're using wires to hold together so it still runs. Give them a break and they're going to go out and spend it. They're going to spend it at the mechanic shop. They're going to hire a building trades person to fix their house. So that's why what he's done is totally counterproductive. And people need to understand it, and they don't. Because there's only one newspaper, and I'm proud to say it's my hometown newspaper, Kenosha News, that actually gave people this statistic. No other paper told people that people making over 300 grand are getting well over 10 times the tax benefit of people that are average working families in this state, and that people that work for under $8 an hour got a tax increase. There's not a paper in the state that said that. Now, it's not because there wasn't a media blitz. There was a media blitz. And I'll talk about that later, what we've been doing in that regard. So I think we should kind of end on that, because I really want your ideas and your thoughts, because we really need to find a way to shake up these papers. And I've got some ideas, but you probably all have ideas too. So let's start with taxes, because that's where the governor, score one for the governor. Because people don't know what he did in taxes, so they think he did something good. They think he's like President Obama, that actually gave a break to the working people. And why did they think that? Because the newspapers across the state gave him those bold headlines, governor to give tax breaks to the middle class. And then he went ahead and did exactly the opposite, and the paper never covered it. I mean, it's almost outrageous. I mean, if the governor controlled the media, he couldn't be doing a better job. I mean, think about it. I mean, if this were a communist country or a totalitarian regime, and you controlled the media, I don't think it could have worked any better for him. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So now let's talk about budget here. Because this is the one that I think may be the worst decision we made in a generation. And this is the part, because he likes to call himself the CEO. Well, honest to God, and I know you're on the tape, and so you hesitate. But when you look at the decisions, you think, could he even run a gas station, for God's sakes? I mean, because any CEO of any company in any place in Wisconsin that charged all of you $100 million more to insure 85,000 less people would be fired immediately, right? Who the hell would keep somebody in a job that makes those kind of decisions? I mean, it should be, every newspaper in the state should have written bold editorials. The CEO needs to be fired. I mean, it's just outrageous. I mean, what kind of decision making? And he has this cockamamie idea that, well, because I really want people to get private insurance, and somehow they're going to end up with more private insurance because I'm going to force them into the exchange. And it's just, again, it defies basic economics. But basically, that's the second statistic. You've got to help people to understand that the governor made a decision that all of us are going to pay $100 million more for, and 85,000 less people are going to be insured. To me, it's end of story. I mean, you should be out of a job. It's just amazing. So that, try this. I remember. It was quite painful. So then, let's talk about education, because somebody else brought up over here about the whole privatization. And make no mistake about it. His goal is to privatize education in this state. You can't come to any other conclusion. Now think about what he told the people of the state. Just like when he told them he was going to give them a middle class tax break. Just like he told them that somehow he was going to improve insurance for everybody in the state with his alternative badger care proposal. Now, on education, what did he tell us? He said there's 9 failing districts in this state. So we need voucher schools to help these 9 failing districts, like Beloit, or like Kenosha, or like Fond du Lac, or Waukesha. So these 9 failing districts, if we only could give them voucher schools, somehow they'd be better off. So that's how he sold this, right? He went all around and, we got these 9 failing districts, and don't worry, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to give them voucher schools. Now, of course, the interesting thing is the DPI then put out the statistics where they analyzed math and reading scores in Milwaukee and in Racine, and the data shows that the voucher schools perform worse than the public schools. So it's hard to imagine how you can say the solution for failing schools are these schools over here whose performance standards are even worse. I don't know how you can make that argument. But then, what do we end up with? Just like when he said we're going to give middle-class tax break, we end up with vouchers for everybody. Every district in the state now can have vouchers, essentially, is what he wants us to have. Now, that means that school districts that aren't failing like these 9, of course, tell the superintendents in these 9 districts they're failing districts and see what they have to tell you. But, so how do you move from helping these 9 failing districts to saying everybody needs this? And you get, obviously, it's because he wants to privatize the public schools in the state. And that, it's pure and simple, it's just so clear. And, what's that? Well, you know what, it's part of the whole divide and conquer philosophy. Because obviously, if you've got a kid in a private school, you're thinking, I'm going to get something out of this. And then, ironically, you do now get something out of this. Because they passed a tax break for anybody whose kids are in voucher schools. Now, I love the Green Bay Packers more than I love any other sports team. But I don't think the Green Bay Packers need a tax break to send their kids to a voucher school. I mean, I just don't understand how you can even argue that. And somebody brought up the issue of student debt. The second largest amount of debt in the country after mortgage loans is student loans. How can you argue we need to give the Green Bay Packers a tax break to send their kids to voucher schools, but that any of us whose kids are in college, like my kid is right now, we can't deduct that student debt? Well, where's the basic fairness again? I mean, he fails to test the basic fairness. And so I think that, it's very important. Let me just summarize again. And I don't need to be pedantic about this, but I just think it's so essential that we make sure that people understand, 3 simple things. One, that he gave tax breaks, well over 10 times for people to make it over $300,000, and for the average working family who's going to get less than $10 a month. I think people need to know that. If you made under $9 an hour, your taxes went up. So people need to know that. Second, that they need to know that he made a decision to charge all of us $100 million for 85,000 less people to be insured. And third, we need to know that he's starving the public schools. He's not even restoring it's not even a quarter, I believe, of the amount of money that he took out 2 years ago at a time of a surplus now. But he's giving, he's giving voucher schools, and I forget how much it is. It's like $100 and some per pupil. No, it's more than that. It's $1,200, I think it is it not?
6,000.
What?
It's like 6,000.
I know what I'm shipping about. I'll post it tonight. So make sure we get that number right. But the amount is like significant. It's a different stratosphere than what he gives to the public schools. So I think people need to understand that he told everybody he was going to fix these 9 failing districts, and he ends up with a solution where he gives significant more money to voucher schools all across the state now compared to the public schools. So I think those are 3 just essential issues that are fundamental to everything that we believe in. And then you've got these other issues. Like somebody asked about, this selling our public assets without bids. Now, when Jim Doyle was governor, and he gave a contract to Telephone, which, without a bid. At the time, he did it because they were going to move into Wisconsin and create jobs in Wisconsin. So you can still say it was a bad decision. And the reason why you can say it is because that's what every Republican said. How outrageous it is. How terrible that Jim Doyle gave a contract to a company moving to Wisconsin to build trains without a bid. That should never happen, he said. Except that when Governor Walker tried, in previous session to sell our power plants without any bids. That's what he tried to do. Then, that failed, so he said, I know, let's not just do power plants, let's be able to sell our highways, our bridges, our way stations, our university buildings, our Capitol, Camp Randall, whatever it is, without any bids. And then all of a sudden, there wasn't any Republican saying how outrageous this was. I guess it's okay that the governor can sell things, that Governor Walker can sell things, because he's a Republican governor without any bids. And it is just unbelievable, and we see the statistics. In Indiana, they sold highways. Now they've got massive problems with their highways. They're not fixing up. Arizona sold their capital. They're trying to buy it back. And they won't sell it anymore. And they don't know what to do. I mean, the examples are all around us, right? It's unbelievable. So, but that's what we're stuck with. Now, I'll give him credit for two things. He had all these backroom after midnight deals where they brought in all this outrageous stuff. And he did veto the bail bonds, which was eliminated about 30 years ago because of the corruption. So I was glad he did that. He vetoed a provision to get rid of the Center for Investigative Journalism being vetoed. But what about the other, issues that came in after midnight, backroom deals, a day before the budget passed? What about all the things like people who have children who are poisoned by lead paint that are currently in court, that spent thousands of dollars, that for the first time in the history of the state, according to the Association of Justice, we're going to retroactively apply standards to people that are in court right now? It's just unbelievable. Why did he veto that? Why didn't he veto the fact to make it easier to cut off people's cable TV stations? These are all part of these after midnight backroom deals. And payday lending, which, of course, as soon as he came in, he changed the rules to broaden that. And then they did something even further once again, and he didn't veto that. Why didn't he veto, I could name 6 other items of things that he could have vetoed that were all part of these after midnight backroom deals. Nobody ever saw, that nobody asked for except for special interest. And, and he didn't veto those things. And most of them are just, things that I think the average citizen, if they're brought up as a separate bill, wouldn't vote for. Who would allow, somebody that's in court now, you have the standards changed retroactively for kids who've been poisoned by lead? And so that's the budget, essentially, and just in brief. And I'm happy to go back and answer questions. But I want to end on this point, and then we'll get into more detailed questions. And that's the fact about the meeting. And you say, well, why did you do meetings? Well, what we did is Robert Voss had told his caucus privately that there would be no amendments. He wouldn't accept any amendments. It already been voted down. And so then he came into our caucus. We were supposed to start on Tuesday the budget. So he came in around noon because they still weren't ready. They had their final so-called technical amendment ready. And he told us point blank, hey, right now we already have votes, not going to have any amendments. So we did exactly what someone said here. We decided that, instead of beating our head against the wall, because the week earlier on this forced ultrasound, and I'm going to talk about that just for a minute, then go back to media, on this forced ultrasound, you had people give some of the most passionate speeches I've ever heard in my life. People that shared things that they had never shared publicly ever before. A woman who had been raped and talking about the impact of being raped, but if you don't report it the first 30 days, then you still have to get an ultrasound in order to terminate your pregnancy. If, let's say, one woman told a story about, I can tell you their names, it's all public record, Sonia Pope Roberts, who, she had a child who, the fetus she was carrying could not be born alive. The doctor said there was absolutely no chance. It was fairly early in pregnancy. She found it out on the same day she found out that her husband was not going to survive cancer. So she told this impassioned speech. Tears are coming down most of her eyes listening to this speech and saying, so why would you force me to have to go and have an ultrasound? And then, on top of it, the doctor would have to follow a script and read a description of what this fetus looks like that can't be born viable. She said, can't you at least accept an amendment that if a person is in these circumstances, they shouldn't be forced to have an ultrasound? But not once. Despite over a dozen amendments, every single time, no matter how impassioned the speech, no matter how ridiculous, some of the provisions, like you could actually be forced to be held down to have an ultrasound. That's how outrageous it is. And they still didn't do it. So what we decided to do, we decided we would do any amendments. Instead, we were going to do the same, when somebody suggested we had a day of action. We traveled the state. We sent members to every corner of the state, talking about the things that were in this budget, speeches just like I gave you, sharing this data with all these media sources all around the state in hopes that in the Senate we only need 2 votes, and we knew Dale Schultz was opposed to most elements of this budget. All you needed was one more, thinking maybe if the media would report on this stuff, we could pick up one more vote in the Senate. And of course it wasn't to be, because they have real close lockdown over there too. And the reason for that is because people are more afraid of losing in a primary than they are afraid of losing in a general election, because the Tea Party just throws an ungodly amount of money in primaries now against anybody that doesn't toe the line. So that's why they're voting that way. That's why they vote for things that they themselves stand there and shake their head. They can't believe they have to vote this way, but they have no option given the amount of money in politics. And the fact that they probably would lose a primary if they didn't vote for all this outrageous stuff. Many of the things that they don't believe in. So we went all across the state, media blitz, and met with all these media sources. I don't know how many interviews I did. I boarded the press. I said, look, if you don't print anything else, at least print these 2 statistics on healthcare tax. None of them. Maybe some of the electronic media might, and track all those. And sometimes, if you just repeat yourself, that's all you're willing to give. Sometimes you don't get a showcase. So we might have gotten some coverage on that. But on the print media, we couldn't get anybody to report those statistics. So I want to end on that point. I'm happy to answer any other questions, but I want to talk about it. Because, I've got some ideas. I think that what we need now more than ever before is we need people to just write letter after letter after letter to the editor to say what is wrong with your. How could it be that you won't even report that our government's decided to charge everybody $100 million to cover 85,000 people? How can you not report this? Right now, how is it that you would not report the fact that we're giving well over 10 times the tax rate to people making over $300,000 than the average worker? How is it that you don't report the fact that people that work 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year for $8 an hour had their taxes raised? How is it that you don't report this stuff? I think we've got to bring pressure. Because after all, supposedly it's still a free press. Supposedly they can still report anything they want, but they sure don't seem to. As I indicated in the beginning, I think the governor could hardly have gotten better press if he had his staff working for the press. And so we do have a big challenge. And, we try as best we can to get things on electronic media, on Facebook, and send out emails and things of that sort. We try to ask people to repost things. And, but I know it's a limited group there. But any ideas you have on that, please share them. I am all ears. I am as open-minded as you can imagine. I want to hear what you think we can do. Because I know that not even half